The outgoing First Lady, the incoming First Lady have just come down the steps onto the inaugural platform. Mrs. Nancy Reagan and Mrs. Carter taking their seats. They'll be beside their husbands. The vice presidential wives, Mrs. Mondale and Mrs. Bush, preceded them to their seats and stand, and the inaugural ceremony is really practically underway. In just a moment, the Senator Hatfield, who is the chairman of the Joint Congressional Inaugural Committee, will be coming down the stairs to open the ceremony. Of course, before then, Vice President-elect Bush will enter. That will be any second now. Then President-elect Reagan. We have from our CBS News sources in Tehran a story that no planes have yet taken off, despite a report by the Associated Press quoting an Iranian official saying that the plane bearing the hostages had left. We had that about 3 or 4 minutes ago. CBS News sources say that is not the case. Back on the inaugural platform, Mrs. Reagan with her family gathered around her are now awaiting the arrival of the president and the president-elect. I don't know what that siren is we hear in the background. The Marine Band is still playing out in front of the platform here. Somewhere into our microphones, an open microphone somewhere, we hear a siren. But there's no indication that there's any problem up here in Capitol Hill. We see Mrs. Reagan awaiting the arrival of the president. At Andrews Air Force Base, Rita Flynn may have something for us. Rita?
Walter, the special State Department group that has been out here since about 10 o'clock was waiting in a VIP lounge until we're told they got a cue from the White House to board the plane that you see behind me. Not this one that's moving right in front, but the one behind it that will take them to Frankfurt. This is a support group. They have just moved out of the VIP lounge and are standing on the tarmac. A group of about 30 people, and appear to be preparing to board this plane. Now, once again, we were told these people would not be leaving the VIP lounge until they heard some word from the White House, until they were given a cue, and it appears they have been given some sort of a cue.
Back here at the inaugural platform, where you see there in Mrs. Reagan and Mrs. Bush, waiting the arrival of the president-elect.
They'll be coming out, Walter, with a congressional...
Here they are. We see them coming down the steps. So there's the president and Vice President Mondale and Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill. Excuse me, Bruce.
No, I was just saying, Congressman Willen, that's Jim Wright, the majority leader behind that.
This is President-elect Reagan and the chairman of the committee, Mr. Hatfield, and John Rhodes, who is the outgoing minority leader of the House of Representatives. He is now the former, I suppose. We have the new Congress in session now.
That shot, Walter, is, I think, in that little reception room. They use it for House and Senate conferees. It was part of the new East Wing construction a few years back, where Governor Reagan is waiting. Since the protocol says he's the last one to come. Sorry.
They're running just a little bit behind the schedule that had been announced earlier. President-elect Reagan was supposed to have been entering onto the platform right at this specific moment, with the herald trumpets sounding, 14 trumpeters and a couple of drummers from the U.S. Army herald trumpets. But for some reason, a delay. I wonder what that could be about. Here we are.
President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, and the Vice President, Walter Mondale.
Whether you could hear or not, but President Carter was just asked if the hostages are out, and he responded saying, "Not yet, not yet." again, I don't know whether you could hear as President Carter entered or not, but he was asked whether or not the hostages were out, and his response as he walked by was not yet.
Something like that.
Apparently that's the story. CBS has been told that the planes have not left the airport as yet. I thought I noted, Bruce and Bob, there a moment ago that Mrs. Carter seems rather grim at this moment. We've been told throughout this transition that she took the defeat much harder than the president himself and has really hardly recovered from it. It was thought that she had kind of brightened up a bit in the last couple of weeks, but she doesn't look very, very happy today.
Well, I suppose it's just one more straw, you know. Absolutely want to go out on a high note, and a high note was getting those people back. And, you know, it's one more thing that went wrong.
It's an interesting thing that Rita Flynn reported from out at Andrews Air Force Base a moment ago, that the people there in the State Department team had been told would not be leaving there until they had had some cue from the White House, and indeed Rita said they were preparing to leave. But yet, as Phil Jones just reported, Mr. Carter said the hostages are not out yet. So, as it has been so much of the time, Walter, we simply don't know. We follow
Here's the new Vice President of the United States, George Bush, 57 years old, successful oil operator from Midland and Houston, Texas. Fought hard for the presidential nomination, but and went right down to the last of the primaries in a valiant effort. He thought that he had unseated the favored candidacy of Ronald Reagan in the Iowa primary, the first in the nation, but from there on out, from New Hampshire on, it was downhill for him. He then accepted the vice presidential nomination handed to him by the president-elect at Detroit in that dramatic night when it was thought that Gerald Ford might be the running mate for a brief time. George Bush had already given up and was in his pajamas at his hotel when the phone call came that Ronald Reagan wanted him as his running mate. He accepted with, I think the word would be, alacrity.
Mr. Ford didn't come to the inauguration this year, did he?
No, he did not, nor did the other living ex-president, Richard Nixon. And Mr. Ford said, with the graciousness that is his, that he did not want to upstage the day for Ronald Reagan. And there is some other talk also that there was a feeling that if he came and Richard Nixon did not, then the Nixon absence would be even more noteworthy, and they didn't want that either. Here is Ronald Reagan.
You were talking a while ago,
Last
Walter,
few minutes as a civilian.
talking a while ago about how much younger the Congress is now. You know, Mr. Carter is going to be one of the youngest ex-presidents that we've had in quite some time.
Indeed he is, which gives him many years of activity, which would be his to decide upon, of course. Says he's going to lecture, teach, write his memoirs, but nothing planned beyond that. Fish, of course, as he likes to do, and hunt. But he may be in the position of some of the other young exitees, is there such a word, from this high office. He may get again into public service. Hoover, you remember, many years of publisher, wrote 14 books, I think, or something like that, but he did some major studies on world food problems, on governmental reorganization. He's the most recent who has been that active.
Mr. Carter, of course, has talked about doing religious work from time to time, and I suppose maybe that's what he'll turn to.
It could happen, of course.
Remember 4 years ago, Gerald Ford left this inauguration and went directly to a golf tournament.
Yes. Well, it appears that President Carter will not be going directly to any such restful retreat as that. He is scheduled to be named by President Reagan as his delegate to the United Press has sent a flash at 11:35 that the hostages are free. We do not know yet any details of that or whether it's official.